While Erdogan won't be able to build a pipeline through Syria, the capture of the lion's share of Syria by Ankara-controlled Islamists now allows Recep Erdogan to begin realizing his geopolitical ambitions. The prizes here are the northern Syrian territories. Aleppo has always been the economic center of the region. The resolution of the Kurdish issue, the status of a new Middle Eastern sultan, and of course, the construction of a gas pipeline from Qatar through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey to Europe. The fact is that Erdogan has long, since the 2000s, dreamed of closing all alternative Russian routes of hydrocarbon supplies to Europe from the eastern, northern, and southern directions. Moreover, for Ankara, this was not only and not even so much a source of income, as it was a lever of pressure on Brussels, and the Turks would use this lever much more effectively than Ukraine. Not only would they squeeze money out of Europe, but they would also put pressure on the country's accession to the EU, and also on the issue of protecting the Turkish diaspora in Germany and other European countries. However, back then, in the 2000s, Bashar al-Assad stood in the way of Erdogan's geopolitical ambitions. The Syrian president refused to allow the pipeline to pass through his territory. It was believed that by doing so, he was protecting the interests of Russia, which was the main supplier of gas to Europe and did not need competition from cheap pipeline gas from Qatar, and Iran, which wanted to send its gas to Europe. It was believed that Assad's refusal was one of the reasons why Turkey started a proxy war against him, supporting the Syrian stage of the Arab Spring in the 2010s. Now Ankara has won this war. Assad is gone, and the head of Turkish intelligence is rolling along the streets of Damascus with the head of the groups that seized Syria. However, Erdogan will not receive a gift in the form of a pipeline. Firstly, because the initial obstacle has turned into the only possible tool. It would have been quite possible to come to an agreement with Bashar al-Assad within the framework of a comprehensive settlement of Syrian-Turkish relations. The Syrian president was actively trying to diversify ties and find some funds to restore the country destroyed by the civil war. Now, after the overthrow of Assad and the prospect of the Libyanization of Syria, that is, a war of all against all, there is no single force that will ensure the safety of the construction, and most importantly, the functioning of the pipeline. There is no chance that some local tribal leader will sit on the pipe and start demanding payment for its further maintenance, as is happening with oil terminals in Libya. And with such risks, no one will invest billions of dollars in the construction of a pipeline. Just as no one invested money, for example, in projects to export Central Asian hydrocarbons through Afghanistan to the coast of the Indian Ocean. Secondly, there are not enough free gas volumes. Qatar currently exports its gas by tankers to East Asia and other premium regions, and it has invested a lot of money in expanding this export, in particular in building gas liquefaction terminals. Sending pipeline, i.e. much cheaper gas to Europe, means depriving itself of part of the liquefied natural gas exports and generally reducing the global gas price, in other words, to incur a relative loss. Yes, Qatar could theoretically accept such losses, especially if its Turkish friends asked it nicely, and diversification of gas supply routes may be of interest to some of the Qatari leadership. But here comes the third, namely new transit risks, and not only from Syria, but also from Saudi Arabia, the largest transit country in terms of pipeline length. The fact is that Saudi-Qatari relations deteriorated in the 2010s. Geopolitical conflicts, complex personal relationships between ruling dynasties, differences in views on political Islam, and which terrorist groups in the Middle East should be supported. All this led to a conflict, the apotheosis of which was a complete blockade of Qatar from 2017 to 2021. In general, the conflict was resolved. But there is no guarantee that Riyadh will not repeat its approach to the projectile and renew the blockade. This means that the pipeline, strategically important for Qatar, cannot be launched through Saudi Arabia. In addition, the Americans will also be against it. Yes, in the 2000s, the United States actively supported any plans to diversify Russian gas supplies to Europe at the expense of other suppliers, any suppliers. However, now the place of these any has been taken by American companies. Washington has established the export of LNG to Europe, much more expensive than Russian gas, not to mention Qatari, and therefore now the Americans do not need any others. And Qatar will listen to this request. After all, the role of the United States, not even in defense, but in the survival of this small Middle Eastern emirate, is much greater than that of Turkey. Finally, to build a pipeline, not only transit security and sufficient volumes of free gas are needed, but also a guarantee of sales of these volumes. And there is no such guarantee. If in the 2000s it was, gas consumption in Europe was growing, then now, during the deindustrialization of the Old World, the future of its consumption is unclear, unlike, for example, the same East Asian market. Therefore, Recep Erdogan will not receive any Qatari pipe. Let him enjoy other Syrian gifts.